Most people spend their entire lives trying to earn respect from the wrong people, in the wrong way, using the wrong strategy. And the painful irony, the more desperately you try, the faster that respect slips away. Think about that for a second. You have seen it. Maybe you have lived it. You try harder. You explain more. You show up more. You give more. You bend more. And the person on the other side, the enemy, the rival, the person who clearly does not have your best interest at heart, they do not soften. They get bolder. They push harder. Because what you showed them was not strength. What you showed them was a target. Enemies do not respect the person who tries hardest to earn it. They respect the person who appears to need it least. That is not a motivational quote. That is a psychological principle, one that Niccolò Machiavelli documented 5 centuries ago with the kind of cold, ruthless clarity that made his work controversial then, and still makes it uncomfortable now. Because Machiavelli did not write about how the world should work. He wrote about how it actually does work. He wrote about what people genuinely respond to, not what they say they respond to, but what moves them at a behavioral level. People do not respect kindness in the face of conflict, not because kindness is weak, but because in a power dynamic, consistent softness signals that you can be pushed. And people, especially the ones who are working against you, will keep pushing as long as that signal remains. But here is the other side of that equation, and this is equally important. Enemies do not respect aggression either, not real, lasting respect. When you react with anger to every provocation, when you fight back loudly and visibly, what you are actually doing is handing them control. You are proving that they can move you. That with the right words, the right action, the right pressure point, they can shift your emotional state completely. That is not dominance. That is dependency. So what do people actually respect? They respect psychological advantage. They respect the person who seems to be operating on a level they cannot fully access. The person who is calm when the room is chaotic, who is patient when everyone else is impulsive, who appears to be playing a game that nobody else can completely see, let alone beat. Machiavelli called it the quiet control of the situation, the ability to shape outcomes not through noise, but through strategy, not through reaction, but through positioning. And the people who master this, even partially, experience something most people never do. Their enemies begin to recalibrate around them. Not because they demanded it, not because they fought for it, but because something in the way they carry themselves makes aggression feel like a bad investment. Today, we are going through 7 strategic shifts from Machiavellian thinking that will silently reshape how the people around you, including the ones who oppose you, see you, position themselves around you, and ultimately treat you. These are not tricks. They are not mind games. They are frameworks grounded in real human psychology, and every single one of them is something you can begin applying immediately. Stay with me through all 7, because they build on each other, and by the time we reach the end, you will see the complete picture of what genuine psychological power actually looks like, and why most people never access it. Now, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I control the game. Let's get into it. Number 1. Control the frame of interaction. Every interaction runs inside a frame. A frame is the invisible premise underneath the surface of what is being said. It is the unspoken story that determines how everything inside that interaction gets interpreted. Who is in the right? Who owes an explanation? Who carries the burden of proof? The frame is set before the first word is spoken, and whoever sets it controls the entire dynamic that follows. Most people walk into conflicts without realizing this. They respond to what is being said on the surface. They defend themselves, they argue, they try to prove their point, all without noticing that they have already accepted a premise that puts them at a disadvantage. They are playing inside a frame someone else built, and that is why, no matter how well they argue, they always feel like they are losing ground. Imagine someone publicly questions your judgment in front of people whose opinion matters to you. The question sounds reasonable on the surface, but underneath it is a frame, and the frame says, your judgment is in question. The moment you rush to defend yourself, you have accepted that frame. You have agreed, through the very act of defending, that the premise applies. Now you are not just answering a question. You are operating inside a reality they constructed, and they have all the structural advantage. This is one of the most consistent patterns in how people lose power in social and interpersonal conflicts. It is rarely about who argues better. It is almost always about who is operating inside whose reality. Machiavelli understood this with total clarity. He wrote that a strategically aware leader never allows another person to define the terms of engagement. Because the terms of engagement are not neutral, they favor whoever set them. The moment you react inside someone else's narrative, you have already given up something significant before you have said a single word in response. Stop reacting inside their frame. Start building and maintaining your own. This does not mean ignoring what is being said. It means responding from a completely different premise, one that you control. Instead of defending the thing they questioned, you speak from a position that assumes the questioning does not carry the weight they intended. You redirect, you reframe, you speak from a reality where their narrative does not have the authority they believe it does. The most powerful communicators in history have always done this instinctively. When someone tried to put them inside a frame they did not choose, they did not argue within it. They rejected the premise and replaced it with a stronger one. They made the original frame look small by simply refusing to operate inside it. In your own life, this looks like refusing to over-explain your decisions to people who are not genuinely asking for understanding. It looks like not shrinking when someone implies you need to justify yourself. It looks like redirecting a baited conversation toward a higher level rather than engaging the bait. It looks like responding calmly and confidently from a position of settled authority, rather than from a position of defense. Before responding to any provocation, pause and ask yourself, am I about to step inside a frame someone else built for me? If yes, find a way to respond from your own reality instead. When people sense that their frames cannot trap you, that you always seem to be operating from a more settled, more grounded position, they begin to recalibrate. The psychological handles they were counting on are not there, and that absence alone changes how they approach you. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My frame, my rules. Number 2, use strategic indifference. This is the principle that most people intellectually understand, but almost nobody actually practices. And the gap between understanding it and doing it is where most people lose their power. Every time an enemy provokes you and you react, whether with anger, with defense, with visible frustration, or even with the kind of forced calm that everyone can see through, you give them exactly what they came for. You confirm that they have a lever. You show them which pressure point produces a result. And from that moment forward, they have real, usable leverage over you. Think about what your reaction actually communicates in those moments. It says, this person has enough power over me to change my emotional state. That is not a small thing to give away. That is strategic control, handed over freely, in exchange for a moment of expressed feeling that changes nothing. Machiavelli observed this pattern across political, military, and social dynamics, and came to a clear conclusion. Reacting visibly to minor provocations is one of the most consistent ways that powerful people undermine their own position. Not because their reaction is wrong emotionally, but because it signals that the provocateur has successfully found the edge. And once that edge is found, it will be used repeatedly. Now here is the distinction you need to understand, because this is where most people get it wrong. Strategic indifference is not suppressed anger. It is not the silent treatment used as a punishment. It is not sulking dressed up as composure. All of those things are still emotional reactions. They still communicate that something landed. Strategic indifference is something fundamentally different. It is the genuine redirection of your attention toward what actually matters to you, so that the provocation simply does not register as important enough to compete for your focus. When you are genuinely indifferent, not performing it, but actually living in a space where you have more important things demanding your attention, the effect on the other person is disorienting. They threw something and nothing came back. They pushed on something and it did not push back. They expected friction and they found air. That lack of response is not nothing. It is a statement. It says, "You are not at the level of my concern." And that statement, made consistently through behavior rather than words, is one of the most psychologically powerful things one person can communicate to another. There's also a social dimension to this that is easy to overlook. When you respond with hostility to every attack, you elevate the attacker. You make them visible. You signal to everyone watching that they are significant enough to command your full emotional response. But when you are visibly unbothered, when you continue moving in your own direction with focus and purpose, people who are watching draw a very different conclusion. They see someone who has something more important going on, someone operating on a level above the current conflict. And that perception quietly builds your authority in ways that fighting back never could. The discipline here is real. In the moment, silence and redirection feel like losing. Your instinct says, respond, defend, push back. Overriding that instinct requires a clear understanding of what you are actually protecting, not your pride in the short term, but your power in the long term. Ask this question every time you feel the pull to react. Does responding here make me more powerful or less? Does it move me toward my goals? Or does it keep me anchored in a battle that only benefits them? Most of the time, the honest answer will tell you exactly what to do. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. Unbothered, unstoppable, me. Number 3. Let people reveal themselves. The most common and most costly mistake people make when they sense an enemy is moving before they have the full picture. The instinct is completely understandable. You sense that someone is working against you. You feel the threat. And the natural impulse is to act, to confront, to call it out, to make a move before they do. Waiting feels passive. Waiting feels like letting them get away with something. So people confront early. And in doing so, they make one of the most consistent errors in personal strategy. When you confront someone before you fully understand what you are dealing with, two things happen immediately. First, you reveal your hand. You show them exactly what you know, what has gotten under your skin, and where your attention has been focused. You let them see your emotional response before they have finished revealing their strategy. And the moment they see that, they adapt. They go quiet. They become more careful. Whatever they were doing, they do it more subtly now, because you just told them you were watching. Second, you lose the information advantage you had. Before you acted, You knew something they didn't know you knew. That asymmetry was valuable. The moment you confront, you trade that advantage for a moment of expressed frustration that rarely produces the result you were hoping for. Machiavelli understood patience as a form of active intelligence, not as passivity, but as the deliberate creation of space in which your opponent can continue revealing themselves without knowing they are being observed. He wrote about how a wise strategist never moves on incomplete information when patience will produce complete information at no additional cost. And here is why patience works so reliably in these situations. People cannot maintain a calculated performance indefinitely. When the pressure is off, when they believe they are not being closely observed, they settle back into their natural patterns. The person working against you will eventually overplay their hand. They will move too boldly, say too much to the wrong person, reveal the strategy through an action that was supposed to be invisible. But they will only do this if you give them the space to do it. The discipline this requires is specific. On the outside, nothing has changed. You are present, calm, and unreadable. You are not avoiding the person. You are not visibly tense around them. You are simply neutral, which is actually a very active posture, because neutral means you are not tipping your hand in either direction. On the inside, you are collecting information. You are watching patterns. You are noticing who they align themselves with when they want cover, what they say when they think the moment is unobserved, how their behavior changes under different kinds of pressure. All of this is intelligence, and it accumulates rapidly when you stop reacting and start observing. The result is an asymmetry of information that grows increasingly in your favor the longer you maintain it. You know things about their strategy and their vulnerabilities that they do not know you know. And when the right moment to act arrives, and it always does, you act with precision and full knowledge rather than with guesswork and emotion. The person who speaks less and observes more always understands the room better than the person making the most noise. Let them move. Let them talk. Let them operate with the confidence that they have not yet been seen. What they are actually doing is building the case against themselves. All you have to do is wait for it to be complete. Now, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I watch, I win. Number 4, become a difficult target. Adversaries do not choose targets randomly. They are opportunistic by nature. They scan for the path of least resistance, the person with the most visible pressure points, the most predictable reactions, the most accessible vulnerabilities. And when they find those things, they use them. This is not cynicism. This is simply how conflict works at a psychological level. Think about how it operates in the natural world. A predator never targets the strongest member of the group. It circles the edges. It waits. It looks for the one that is struggling, isolated, giving off signals of vulnerability. Because efficiency matters. Attacking something that fights back well is costly. Attacking something that does not know its own strength is easy. The people who want to undermine you operate with the exact same logic. They look for what is easy, and if you want to make yourself a far less attractive target, you need to understand what currently makes you readable and deliberately change it. The person who is too easily moved, too easily read, and too easily provoked becomes a target simply by being predictable. Predictability is not just a personality trait, it is a strategic vulnerability. Because once someone can reliably predict how you will respond to a given stimulus, they can engineer situations designed to produce exactly that response and use it against you. So what does it mean to become a difficult target? The first layer is about what you display publicly. Most people are far too open about what bothers them, what they fear, what makes them insecure, and what will reliably set them off. Every one of those revelations is a piece of a map of how to get to you. The more of that map you give away, the more exposed your position becomes. The shift here is not about becoming closed or cold. It is about being intentional with what you share and with whom. Your vulnerabilities are not secrets, but they do not need to be on display either. Skilled negotiators never reveal the limit they are willing to accept. Skilled strategists never reveal the line they cannot cross. You can operate with the same discipline, not hiding who you are, but protecting the specific pressure points that can be weaponized. The second layer is about your visible reactions. Even when something genuinely affects you internally, the gap between your inner experience and your outer presentation is a form of strategic power that most people never develop. When you can feel a thing privately without broadcasting it publicly, you remove one of the most reliable tools that adversaries use, the feedback loop of seeing their attack land. When someone tests a tactic on you and there is no visible result, no defensiveness, no flare of anger, no visible rattling, they are left with uncertainty. They do not know if the tactic failed, if you are prepared for it, or if you simply cannot be moved that way. And uncertainty is a powerful deterrent. It makes the cost of continuing to push feel unpredictable. The third layer is what you project through your presence. This is not about performing strength. It is about developing a genuine internal stability that naturally expresses itself through the way you carry yourself, the pace at which you move through the world, the quality of your stillness, the groundedness in your manner. These things communicate something that words cannot, that there is a foundation here that will not crack easily. When adversaries sense that quality, and they do sense it, even when they cannot name it, they recalculate. They weigh the effort of coming after someone who appears genuinely settled against the easier option of redirecting their energy elsewhere. And in most cases, they choose the easier option, not because they respect you yet, but because you stop being worth the trouble. That is the beginning of safety. And from safety comes the kind of confidence that eventually becomes the beginning of real respect. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I am unshakable. Number 5. Shift from reaction to positioning. Most people live in permanent reaction. Something happens, they respond. Someone does something, they answer it. A situation develops, they deal with it in the moment. They are always one step behind, always catching up, always responding to an initiative that someone else started. And because they are always reactive, they are always fighting the same battles, because they are never actually moving the board forward. Machiavelli addressed this directly through one of his most famous observations. He compared the forces of circumstance to a flooding river. When a river overflows, the person who built no infrastructure is swept away entirely. But the person who built channels, banks, and walls in advance, they direct where the water goes. They are not more powerful than the river. They are simply prepared for it. And preparation is a form of power that reactive people never access, because they are always too busy responding to the current flood to prepare for the next one. That preparation is what positioning means. Positioning is asking a fundamentally different question than reaction does. Reaction asks, how do I handle this situation right now? Positioning asks, where do I want to be 6 months from now, and what should I be doing today? Not just to survive this moment, but to ensure that my standing grows stronger, regardless of how this particular conflict plays out. That second question lives on a different level, and when you start asking it consistently, the entire landscape of how you operate changes. Here is what that difference looks like in practice. When someone is actively working against you, trying to limit your influence, damage your reputation, or block your path, the reactive response is direct engagement. Counter every move they make. Expose what they are doing. Match their energy. These responses can feel satisfying in the moment. They can even produce short-term wins, but they do not change your position. They keep you locked in place, spending your energy on the conflict itself rather than on building something that makes the conflict irrelevant. The positioning response is different at its root. Instead of investing your energy into fighting them directly, you invest it into building the foundation that makes you genuinely stronger, independent of what they do. You build real skills and capabilities that increase your value in ways that cannot be easily undermined. You develop authentic relationships with people who matter in your world, based on real trust rather than political calculation. You align yourself with directions and goals that are important over the long term, so that your standing grows continuously regardless of who is opposing you today. Over time, this strategy produces something that fighting almost never achieves: a position so strong that what your adversary does has diminishing impact. Their attacks land on a foundation that has grown too solid to shake, and at that point, the conflict is effectively over, not because you won a battle, but because you outgrew the battlefield. Reactive players win moments. Positioning players win campaigns. The next time you feel the pull to fire back, to prove a point, to win the current exchange, pause and ask the more important question: does this action move me toward where I want to be? Or does it keep me exactly where I am? If it keeps you stuck, find the positioning move. Find what you can build right now instead of what you can defend right now. Because in the long game, builders always outlast fighters. And when people begin to sense that you are operating on that level, that your energy flows toward something they cannot disrupt, the way they relate to you shifts. They stop seeing you as someone they can destabilize and start seeing you as someone whose direction they simply cannot get in front of. That shift is real, and it is lasting. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments: I play long game. Number 6. Let reputation travel ahead of you. Before you walk into any room, any situation, any conflict, any new relationship, a version of you is already there. Your reputation arrived first, and in many cases the reception you get, the assumptions people bring, the way they approach you before you have said a single word, all of that is a response to that version of you. Not to you directly, to what they have heard, to what they have observed from a distance, to the conclusions they have drawn from watching how others around you behave. Machiavelli devoted serious thought to this. He believed reputation was among the most underused and most misunderstood sources of power available to any leader. Not the reputation a person claimed for themselves. That approach, he observed, almost always produces the opposite of the intended effect. People who talk about their own strength in order to be believed usually come across as insecure. People who promote their own reputation directly make the effort visible, and visible effort undermines the impression of natural authority. Real reputation is not claimed. It is observed and spread by others. It is built through what your consistent behavior says about you, in the moments you think no one is paying close attention. And then it spreads through the people who were paying attention, to people who have never met you yet. When you consistently follow through on what you say you are going to do, that gets noticed and mentioned. When you stay composed in situations that rattle most people, someone who sees it tells someone who wasn't there. When you treat people with fairness even when it would be easier not to, that becomes part of the story that follows your name. When you hold to your standard even under pressure to lower it, people who witness it carry that observation into the next conversation where your name comes up. These observations accumulate. They layer on top of each other into a picture, a living picture of who you are. And that picture is what your reputation actually is. Not what you have declared about yourself, but what enough people have independently seen and described to others. Now, here is where this becomes directly strategic in relation to enemies and rivals. When someone is considering whether to move against you, and the people who want to come at you always do some level of calculation before they act, your reputation is a major factor in that calculation. They ask around. They observe how others relate to you. They gauge the social territory. If what they find is that you are seen as grounded, reliable, and respected by the people around you, that you have real relationships built on real trust, the cost of attacking you just went up significantly, because now it is not just you they are coming against. It is the network of perception that surrounds you, and that is a much more daunting challenge. On the other hand, if your reputation is thin, if people around you cannot speak to who you are under pressure, or if there are visible inconsistencies between what you claim and what you do, that thin ground invites aggression, because the cost of challenging you is lower. Reputation, built correctly, functions like armor you never have to put on. It exists around you continuously. It shapes how every new person approaches you before you have even spoken, and the enemies who sense its strength will frequently reconsider whether engaging with you is worth the cost. The only way to build this kind of reputation is through genuine consistency, not performed consistency, but the kind that comes from actually being the person you intend to be, day after day, in the small moments as much as the visible ones. Build it quietly. Build it through action. And let it do the work that no amount of self-promotion ever could. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My reputation precedes me. Number 7. Control the psychological atmosphere. There is something invisible operating in every interaction you have ever been part of. Something that shapes how people think, feel, and behave inside that interaction without anyone naming it or even consciously noticing it. It is the psychological atmosphere, the emotional tone of the environment, the underlying frequency that runs through a space and determines how everyone inside it processes what is happening. You have felt this. You walk into a room and feel the tension before anyone has spoken a tense word. Or you enter a conversation and immediately feel more settled, more clear, more capable, because the person you are talking to carries a quality of groundedness that pulls your own inner state towards stability. These are not accidents. These tones are set, and they are set by the people in a given space who carry the most internal clarity. Machiavelli's principle of psychological control was one of the deepest elements of his thinking about power. He believed that genuine leadership, the kind that produces lasting influence rather than temporary compliance, was not primarily expressed through commands or through force. It was expressed through the ability to shape the environment in which events unfold, because whoever controls the atmosphere controls how every event inside that atmosphere gets experienced, interpreted, and responded to. That is not a small thing. That is total strategic leverage over an interaction without a single explicit act of control. Some people carry chaos with them, not always in an obvious way. Sometimes it is subtle and low-level. They introduce a slight ambient tension into every environment they enter. They amplify uncertainty. They create the feeling that something unresolved is always hanging in the air. And in that environment of constant low-grade instability, the people around them stay slightly off balance, slightly anxious, which actually gives the chaos carrier a kind of influence, because the disoriented naturally look to the source of the disturbance for signals about how to navigate it. But here is the thing about chaotic influence. It is exhausting, it is fragile, and it eventually produces resentment. The authority it creates depends on constant maintenance and constant new disruption. The moment it stops, the influence collapses. Calm authority is the opposite, and it is infinitely more durable. When you are the most genuinely calm person in a tense environment, not performing calm, but actually grounded in it, something remarkable happens. People begin to orient toward you. In any situation involving stress or uncertainty, human beings instinctively look for anchors, for something stable. When you are that anchor, when your presence communicates settled confidence and clear direction, people unconsciously assign you authority, not because you took it, but because your presence made them feel more capable of navigating whatever was happening. That dynamic works directly against anyone who wants to destabilize you. The tactics most people use to undermine or provoke depend on a single outcome: getting you emotionally activated, getting you reactive, defensive, rattled, or off balance. Those tactics are designed for people who can be shaken. When you genuinely cannot be shaken, when your psychological atmosphere is stable, and you carry that stability into every interaction, those tactics find no surface to grip. They slide, they dissipate, and without the activation they need to work, they fail entirely. This is one of the most profound forms of influence you can develop, because it does not require any direct action at all. It simply requires being the most internally settled person in the room. How do you get there? It starts with your inner foundation. You cannot project genuine calm from a place of genuine chaos. Whatever practices build your internal stability, the habits that help you regulate your own emotional state, clarify your thinking, and reconnect with your core sense of direction. Those are not personal luxuries. They are strategic investments, because the stability they build inside you is what radiates outward into every environment you enter. From there, it is about physical presence. The speed at which you move, the depth of your breathing, the steadiness of your gaze, the deliberateness of how you speak. These signals travel faster than words. They register in the nervous systems of everyone around you before any conscious judgment is formed. When those signals consistently say, "I am here, I am grounded, I know what I am doing," the room responds to that. The atmosphere shifts. You do not need to dominate the conversation. You do not need to be louder, more assertive, or more aggressive than anyone else in the space. You simply need to be the most internally settled, because in any group, the most settled person naturally sets the tone for everyone else. They control the atmosphere, and through the atmosphere, they shape everything that happens inside it. Your enemies sense this before they understand it. They feel that the usual tactics are not finding their mark, that something about engaging with you feels different from what they expected. And that confusion, that recalibration, is the very beginning of involuntary respect. 7 lessons, 7 shifts, and every single one of them points toward the same fundamental truth. Control the frame. Stop operating inside narratives other people built and start defining your own reality in every interaction. Use strategic indifference. Recognize that the calmest, most unbothered person in the room is almost always the most strategically powerful one. Let people reveal themselves. Patience is not passivity. It is active intelligence gathering that builds the information advantage that impulsive confrontation destroys. Become a difficult target. Protect your vulnerabilities, manage what you project, and develop the kind of settled bearing that signals to adversaries that you are not easy ground to cover. Shift from reaction to positioning. Stop fighting the current moment and start building toward a future where this conflict has no real power over you. Let reputation travel ahead of you. Your most durable protection is not what you say about yourself, but what consistent behavior has caused others to say about you. And control the psychological atmosphere, because whoever sets the emotional tone of a space shapes every interaction inside it, without needing to say a word about power.